All right, we move on to the Love Bug 1997 film, which was part of a line of remakes and reboots that came out in the 90s, along with there was ones for Freaky Friday, The Computer Wore Tennis Shoes, Escape to Witch Mountain, The Absent-Minded Professor, The Shaggy Dog, and this one. And like The Absent-Minded Professor, it's more of a sequel reboot than a full-on remake. What I mean by that is the story in this, while it has similar plot lines to the original, this one is a continuation of the story, and this one has a bit of a leg up on a couple of the other sequels, as there's one single solitary thing that this movie has that some of the other sequels, they didn't have. Hail to the king, baby. That's right. Bruce Campbell is the star of this film. He plays Hank, who is a former race car driver, now a mechanic. So that's sort of, and he's brought into this. The story beats that they take from the original is that, much like Jim Douglas, Hank wasn't racing anymore. He was doing something else, where in Jim Douglas in the original, he was in a demolition derby. Here, he's now a mechanic. He's got a buddy who, has that sensitivity where he can talk to inanimate objects or talk to Herbie. He can feel Herbie from the beginning, much like Tennessee. There's a villain who owned the car, got rid of it, and now wants it back, much like Thorndike from the original. He has a little sidekick, much like Habershaw from the original. Yeah. And, even the race at the end of the film kind of mirrors the race at the end of the original film. What I like about it is we start off with a narration from Dean Jones as Jim Douglas, narrating all about Herbie. And then we're put into this where now he's racing, but with, I think his name is Simon, played by John Hannah, who is the villain of this film. And, he's calling Herbie trash, so Herbie, of course, doesn't listen, and the guy comes in last place. And he gets rid of it, and then Hank is put into this contest by his fellow mechanic, played by Clarence Williams III. He's like, I don't want to, you expect me to do this shit? And Clarence goes, ah, yes, the shit. Okay. Tales from the Hood reference. That's not actually in the film, it's a Disney film, but I'm just saying. Anyway, yes. An interesting point about this before I continue is that John Hannah and Kevin J. O'Connor are both in this film. And they would later go on to 2 years later be in the Brendan Fraser Mummy movie as Jonathan and Benny. And if Kevin J. O'Connor didn't still have the voice, you would never know it was him, really. Because he looks totally different. His hair is longer, got a bit of a beard going on. He doesn't have a little mustache and a short little fez. He's different. John Hannah is John Hannah, but I like what they did with the love interest in this, though. Not casting the love interest, because as much as I like Alexandria Wentworth in Living Color, I think she brought too much of that acting, because in Living Color you get to exaggerate your acting a lot. You do exaggerations. You can be a little weird. But she brought that to this movie, and there are times when she's way too sarcastic with her acting. And it just doesn't work for me. She's probably the worst part of this film, to be honest. And there's a lot of bad things. There's a few bad things, I should say. And yeah, I just don't. Even at the end of the film, when they ask her, "Oh, well, what are you gonna call this piece?" Because she's like a reporter and stuff or whatever. And she's like, "The lab bug." I'm just like, could you say that with less wackiness? The love bug. It's like, yeah. And there, like I said, there's this competition. Herbie's one of the cars. You have to fix the car, then drive the car. And he, listening to his buddy, he picks Herbie. And another thing I like, people might criticize this, but I actually kind of like it, is that, in all the other films, when they realize that Herbie is sentient, they just accept it and they go with it. But here, and it works because it's Bruce Campbell as well, he gets a little jealous about the fact that it's the car doing the work and not him. And that makes sense. It always, it's I never thought of that too until watching this. Like, yeah, why didn't the other drivers, not Paco, but like, why didn't the other drivers, like, be like, oh, I don't want this car doing all the work for me. No, they accepted it. And, it's more like they were both doing some stuff. Because sometimes they would drive and sometimes Herbie would take over. So it's not like it was always, Herbie doing it. But yeah, Hank makes a great point, I'm just saying. And at one point, Herbie is destroyed by something I'll get to in a minute. And they bring back Dean Jones. Because they do a funeral for Herbie. And Dean Jones comes back as... I forgot his name. Oh, come on. Come on! Oh, you gotta be fucking kidding me. Jim. It's Jim Douglas. Yes, I don't know why my mind hit a blank there. It's Jim Douglas. And they do this thing where they put them back together. And they say that it has to be the same parts. But they got new parts and they don't know if it's going to work. And, and I love how you cut to Hank, he's working all night, and the next, they cut, and he's sitting there in front of the car, and it's covered, and they're like, did you give up? He's like, give up. It's finished. And it's done. And then there's the scene where Jim Douglas, he's like, I wish we had Hank's like, I wish we had a key to get her started. And Jim Douglas is like, I always had a spare. And he goes to give it to Hank, and Hank's like, no. You do the honor. So he lets Jim Douglas get in. He turns it on, and he smiles. And they're like, it works, but is it Herbie? And you have Jim Douglas do it. He goes, Herbie? I cried. Because it's Jim Douglas in the car again after all those years. It's great. Now, how did Herbie get wrecked? Well, they explain that there was a scientist played by Dana Gould that back in the day, when he was making Herbie, he accidentally knocked a picture of his wife into the formula. And that's what made Herbie come to life. Now, if you go by that, then the other objects in the first one, and even the Lancia in the third one, the animate objects in the second one and the Lancia in the third one wouldn't make any sense, right? If you go by this logic. So, effectively, this would, continuity-wise, just be the first one and this one. But also the TV series in between. Because, as Jim Douglas mentioned, he says that Herbie, if it wasn't for Herbie, he'd find his wife. He wouldn't have met his wife. Now, he wasn't talking about Carol, because, well, he could have if it's just this one and that one. Because by the third one, he's with someone else. But there is a character named Susan, and I messed it up because lady's name in the third film is not Susan. But they meet Susan. Susan's in the TV series. And I'll get to the TV series. I'm currently watching some of the episodes on the YouTube, but I'll get to it. But Simon makes an evil love bug, the hate bug, named Horace. And you got this race at the end. Once you realize that Herbie's still alive, he challenges Hank to a race. Herbie versus Horace. Race to race. In a place where there's no cops, apparently. Until the end, they just show up out of nowhere. But they do make the mistake of trying to copy the original race, where Herbie's cut in half. But this time, it's not this way. It's not width, it's length. So it's cut in half. And much like the original, he comes in first and third place. But they used some CGI, and CGI in 97 was not so good. Overall, this movie's pretty good. They do a thing at the end. They don't do the traditional, like I said, the romance makes sense because Hank and Alex used to date. So there's still that kind of relationship there, not just fall in love out of nowhere. They don't get married at the end, however. They do a thing where it looks like they're going to, but they're not. And they talk. He says, hey, you look good in one of those, with a wedding dress. And they drive off together, but they don't get married. I think that's cool. Oh no, this is pretty good. I'm going to give it an 8 out of 10. It's enjoyable. Some of the CGI is kind of meh. And I know you had to incorporate some stuff from the original, but I never liked that thing where he gets cut in half, because it just doesn't make any sense to me. And in the next scene, he's just fine. Anyway, 8 out of 10. So what are your thoughts on The Love Bug from 1997? Let me know in the comments below. Make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Also, you know what this movie could have used? Fontenoy!